very good morning, good evening. Welcome to our event today. My name is Malte Lohan. I'll be your host for the session today. And what an exciting moment in EU-US trade relations. A new wind is blowing. Expectations are sky high that there is a new chapter that will open a new golden age of EU-US trade collaboration. It's a perfect time to bring together the key voices in this debate from both sides of the Atlantic and to discuss the future EU-US trade relationship, both in terms of the relationship, the consequences for our companies, but more importantly, also the wider implications for the world as a whole. So to help me do this, I'm delighted to introduce to you our distinguished panelists that will be debating this with me today. Zaneta Vegnere, who is the Deputy Head of Cabinet of Valdis Dombrovskis, who is the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, and of course is also the Commissioner responsible for trade. I think everyone here in our audience today will be familiar with the Executive Vice President's role and your role in the Cabinet, so I won't spend much more time on that. To keep things a bit dynamic, what we wanted to do is to approach this second keynote session as a conversation. And I'm just going to jump right into it with my first question to you, Zaneta. It was a turbulent period with the previous administration, and I imagine there's a fair amount of repair work still to be done. I wonder if you can give us a sense of how the Commission is approaching this on the EU side, and what are the top priorities in your inbox, basically, in repairing this relationship and creating the foundation for a new chapter.
Yes, Malte, I will also ask if you can all hear me well. Yes. First of all, I wanted to thank you for the invitation and also for this possibility to address the audience. I think the timing for the event is just perfect because indeed we have just published our trade policy review and we are actively working on the industry strategy. So really, I think thank you very much for organizing this debate. And I would like also to congratulate USTR colleagues on the confirmation of Catherine Tai. Of course, we've been waiting and following her hearings and also the confirmation, so congratulations. Obviously, in Europe, we are in the situation where we had like more time to reflect about our relationship with the United States, and everyone is right to point out that there was a wave of enthusiasm and a wave of raised expectations towards cooperating with Biden's administration. And I'm sure that you have already noticed that on 2nd December last year, we published a comprehensive communication for EU-US agenda for global change. And of course, this communication would look at the various issues, not only trade, it would be also looking at health or economic crisis, or how to rebuild multilateralism, how we could work together on facing climate challenges or addressing digital transformation. So I would say that indeed there is a wide range of objectives that we would be very happily discussing with the new administration. But if I have to name few, I would definitely name settling bilateral irritants, so Airbus and Boeing dispute, as well as Section 232 steel and aluminium tariffs as a priority. I would say that it would be a wonderful trust-building exercise. I would also agree that we have to manage expectations and work very hard on solving these irritants. I would agree with Dan that the desire is also here on the other side of transatlantic to work hard and to find solutions, because we simply feel that it would be key for, let's say, repairing maybe this erosion of trust that happened here in Europe during Trump years. And of course, we understand, and as Dan pointed out, we will not always agree on everything. Maybe we will not agree on the ways to go there. But I can reassure you that on behalf of my boss, Executive Vice President Dombrovskis, and the whole team, there's a really heartfelt desire to move on. And as to other topics in my mailbox, as you say, I would say it would be about cooperation on China. Indeed, we share, I would say, many concerns that Dan already outlined, some harmful subsidies, state-owned enterprises, so need for working on this global level playing field, and actually problems that are stemming from China's economic model, indeed. And then also it was interesting because Dan mentions that he was speaking about steel and aluminium tariffs, and pointed out that the problem, the source of the issue is indeed a global overcapacity more than Europe, let's say. And we also would agree that we would have to work together to address this global overcapacity. And this indeed needs a joint work between allies. But I would say that this would also apply to new technologies, to emerging technologies. And actually, this is why we also have tabled this offer to set up a joint trade and technology council that could look at new challenges that are emerging in the realm of cybersecurity, provision of digital services, transfer of data, but also, like we just said, emerging technologies such as, for example, artificial intelligence. So what we would like to do is also to develop a positive agenda where we could work on these new emerging challenges. And anticipate and create better regulatory frameworks together instead of these issues resulting into new trade irritants between Europe and the US.
So I want to come back to the Trade and Technology Council idea in a moment, but I just wanted to pause for a second on the the overarching issue, which of course is on everyone's mind still, unfortunately, which is the pandemic and the recovery of the pandemic. I think everyone is familiar with the EU's response and the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Can you say a few words from your perspective where you see similarities and possibly also divergence between Europe and the US when it comes to the recovery from the pandemic, and the extent to which this maybe has implications for the trade relationship as well?
Well, actually, I think that the US and Europe face very similar challenges, because one of the questions is how would we come out of this pandemic stronger? And in terms of stronger, I mean, would everyone come out of this pandemic stronger? So there is this concern that also Executive Vice President shares, that we should take care of all members of society coming out of this pandemic stronger. So I think it pretty much aligns with the workers' narrative in the United States, and this objective of making sure that all members of society actually get a chance to reestablish their livelihoods. The second issue is that we already see that trade is an answer or part of an answer to coming out of the crisis, because we actually see that export markets that are recovering, they are also boosting the recovery. And let me remind you that 85% of all exporters are small and medium-sized companies, and small and medium-sized companies create 2 out of 3 jobs in Europe. So very important role for trade to support the recovery. So we need more trade and not less trade. That's in the context of recovery.
And
if
I can interrupt on this point of more trade, not less trade. Of course, you know that we would subscribe that any moment. Of course, both the EU and the US are now looking at their strategic dependencies, strategic vulnerabilities. It may be using slightly different words in the US, but it's the exact same exercise, with a focus on critical technologies, and many of those that were mentioned a moment ago, also by Dan and by yourself, Zaneta. To what extent is that a review of these vulnerabilities, of these dependencies, in opposition to what you just said about more trade is what we need, not less?
Yes, indeed. There's a big hype in town around the supply chains and global supply chains. But actually, first of all, I think it's very important that we continue making our policy that is evidence and facts-based. So first, what happens during the pandemics is that there is a lot of emotions flying out, and there is a lot of perceptions of various situations. For example, when we didn't have enough of protective materials, such as like face masks, all of a sudden it could create a perception that our current, let's say, trade models or supply chain models doesn't work. But actually what we see from first studies coming in, for example, OECD studies this summer, show that in general, the fact that Europe and European enterprises are so well integrated in global supply chains, those global supply chains helped us to absorb the shock. So actually, contrary is true to what the first feeling or first perception would prescribe. And this is why I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with screening strategic dependencies or screening strategic value chains. For example, for raw materials that we will need for the future economy, for green economy, for more digital economy, it is perfectly fine to map where these raw materials are and to diversify the strategies for securing access to those materials. But I think what is also equally important, that most of these decisions and most of this screening is done in consultation with industry, because we still believe that ultimately 99 or 98% of problems can be solved by business leaders who know best where their supply chains are and how to diversify them and how to manage risks, because I'm sure you have all had these conversations in your governing boards by now. So I do not think that kind of screening and mapping particular sectors, I mean, let's name semiconductors or let's name pharma, is bad in itself, as long as it stays evidence-based and as long as it is done in close consultation with stakeholders.
Okay, thank you for reassuring us on that, and we know that you and the executive vice presidents are really very mindful of some of the concerns also in the industry that this could be leading to more protectionist instincts, which I understand is not the intention. Before we go to our panel discussion, I wanted to come back to the Trade and Technology Council. We have a lot of participants with us here from the industry, and of course, this is one of the big new initiatives that the Commission is putting forward. You, of course, talked a moment ago about this already in some detail, but I wanted to understand better, how do you see this working in practice, and what would be the respective role of the institutions, of the standardization community, of the industry, because of course, plenty of people, plenty of organizations will have a big stake in this. And the idea is to channel the dialogue, I'm sure, not to duplicate or fragment the dialogue. So I wanted to understand a bit better how you, the Commission, would like this to work in practice. If you can say some words about that.
Yes, first of all, I must say that we also have to respect the time that our US colleagues need to analyze this idea. So I do not want to present it as something agreed and ready-made and everything. So full respect for colleagues in the US taking their time and analyzing this idea. But how Europe sees it, it's of course first of all about possibility to standard set, meaning, let's say, there are books written about Brussels effect, yes, setting standards and exporting them around the globe. And there are books about Washington effect, I'm sure. So we are, the basic idea is, what if we created Brussels plus Washington effect for new emerging technologies, but also for, I would say, already existing set of challenges, such as, for example, cybersecurity or digital services. Yes, so every I would say fields or areas where modernization of global rules is badly needed. And so there is simply this feeling that by teaming up, we could exercise more influence, but it is still too early for me to give you details because we would like to have feedback or give time to the US colleagues to consider it. But one thing that I would like to still add is that Executive Vice President Dombrovskis, he has already confirmed in several meetings with industry associations that he would be, of course, open to look into ways of involving industry in such dialogue as well.
Okay, I had to try. I understand, again, it's early days, and we will be looking at this with a lot of interest, and of course support the ambition also, which is behind the proposed TTC. Zaneta, thank you for sharing your perspective already, and have a wonderful rest of the afternoon. See you very soon.